First question is for Mr. Burton. In October 2024, Brookfield Asset Management brokered a $256 million loan with the Chinese State Bank while the current Prime Minister was the chair of that company. And in light of what we know about China cultivating business ties with senior policymakers and business leaders, would you classify this as a classic example of elite capture?
I am concerned about this. It's similar to when we appointed Dominic Barton as the ambassador to China. That what if the prime ministership is a transitional job for Mr. Carney and that he'll return to business afterwards? The Chinese will naturally take into account what sort of policies he engaged in with regard to China while he was in that position. So I'm not suggesting that Mr. Carney is consciously preparing for this, but the effect is the same. And so one is concerned about matters like this, his previous connections with the Chinese regime, and I mean in his current policies, which emphasize promoting Canadian prosperity through seeking to expand Canadian exports into the Chinese market, is meaning that we aren't implementing the registry, we aren't dealing with Chinese espionage in Canada. We're not taking effective measures against agents of the Chinese regime who are involved in intimidation and harassment activities in our country, and so on. So the Chinese note that, and I think if you look at the impact of our not implementing the registry, from the Chinese government's point of view, I think they welcome it as similar to the Uyghur resolution, where the Prime Minister and the entire cabinet didn't vote in favor of it, that we don't really mean it, that we're not actually going to do it, that they'll continue to engage in their influence activities in Canada unhindered. The other country we have to look at is the United States, who have increasing doubts about the integrity of Canada as a country which is not infiltrated by China or other states. So, it runs into problems with whether we're going to continue in our role with the Five Eyes and the extent to which the United States feels they can share information with us, and it won't end up being leaked to the PRC. So there are a lot of implications in what you're saying here. It's a very complicated question.
I understand. It's a very complicated position that Canada finds itself in right now. You intimated in your testimony, Mr. Burton, that the eagerness by which the Minister in Public Safety Canada and the government has gone about passing Bill C-70, and then subsequently that eagerness seems to be dissipating as time has gone by. We have no appointed commissioner. You have intimated that there seems to be some softening in the implementation and the approach that the government is going to take if they ever do eventually get around to implementing or appointing a commissioner. Do you think that is because of pressure from Beijing? I mean, the Taiwanese have warned us very much that this is exactly the way the PRC does its business. Do you think that this registry is being compromised as part of a larger influence campaign from China?
Whether it's active or passive is another question, but the recent statements by the leader of the Taiwan delegation here in Canada, and Michael Kovrick's recent statements, and others, I agree with them that we do have a problem here of evidently responding to Chinese agendas in Canada, and this is an ongoing process. In other words, the infiltration gets deeper and deeper as time goes on, and China is becoming more and more aggressive, and we're seeing concerns about Chinese infiltration into Canadian infrastructure. Lead story in the National Post today about the possibility of Chinese sabotage of our water supply by working with the filtration stations. But it's not just the water; it's the EVs. There are just all sorts of areas that suggest that a future conflict with China will not be about buildings blowing up in faraway countries, but it'll be about the APMs won't work anymore. The electricity will turn off, and that real Canadian citizens will suffer real consequences from China's cyber infiltration into our system, which appears to be an ongoing matter.
Thank you for those answers, Mr. Burton.
Merci beaucoup.
5 minutes, please. Thank you very much. A question for Mr. Burton.
You've talked a lot about the Foreign Influence Transparency Registry, but I'd like to hear about maybe a blind spot, and it's a topic you've covered, the acquisition of businesses by foreign actors. We know there's nothing like a private company in China. Everything is connected to the state. I'd like to hear about the risks of not better regulating the acquisition of Canadian businesses by Chinese actors and bringing Chinese technology here. We can think of electric vehicles, which are spy tools, depending on how we use them. Drones made in China were acquired by the RCMP. So is this a blind spot we should be looking at?
One question, and you're right. I have written about this. Since 2009, I've published over 200 pieces in the Canadian national press. I'm not sure how much influence they've had on Canadian government policy, but anyway, I keep trying. I think we have to understand that any Chinese business is part of a coordinated complex led by the Chinese Communist Party. As the Chinese leader Xi Jinping said, the party is in charge of everything, and so any investment also involves the party, the military, the security agencies, the government. They're all coordinating together, and I mean that's really why you see such an excellent discount on say the sale price of Huawei technology, because one assumes that they factor in the opportunities for intelligence and data collection when they sell them. There's a lot of Internet of Things stuff going on. The U.S. is concerned about the TP-Link routers, which are considerably cheaper. When I heard about this, I smashed mine with a hammer, but the one that I had to buy to replace it cost 4 times the price of my excellent TP-Link router. So, there are concerns about this in all investment. Is there something else? If China wants to buy a money-losing gold mine up at the north, you find that it's quite close to a NORAD facility and has an outlet into the Northwest Passage. Well, it's all, the mine was losing money, so why did they want it? So I think that all of these kinds of investments are tricky. The problem is that, how can we determine if an enterprise is in fact operating under the influence of a hostile foreign power or simply ethnic Chinese people who want to do a good investment? I think that we need to be looking at that carefully, and of course, we don't want to be involved in discriminating against Canadians simply because of their ethnic origin. So it's a serious matter, and we're clearly not on top of it sufficiently. We need to put a lot more resources into protecting Canadian national interests, because it's really like a game of Go. The Chinese are like putting down tiles everywhere, and eventually they're going to circle us. It's just a matter of time. And the process happens as we don't really fully appreciate their overall planning.
Une question pour vous, Monsieur Scholl.
A question for Mr. Scholl. I'd like to hear your perspective on Canada's position. The registry is not effective yet. The United Kingdom, Australia, and the U.S. have one. So how does that affect Canada's position, given that we're part of the Five Eyes? We're visibly behind on a registry for foreign influence.
Merci pour votre question.
Thank you for your question.
So not well. I mean, I don't know. I'm not security cleared, so I'm just some guy. So I have no idea. But I can't imagine it's helpful. But also, too, maybe I'll back up a step and say the other thing we don't have is a national security strategy. So just on your last question, what you were talking about was strategic state behavior. And so at risk of stating the obvious, strategy begets strategy. One has to, in order to respond, one needs a strategic framework. Our last national security strategy was done in 2004, and it has not been updated since. So if we're talking about gaps and things we don't want to get our hands on, I would start with a strategic framework where this is all linked. Like, I have a hard time seeing the difference between traditional national security, economic espionage, data governance, the spy stuff, and cyber. Like, it's all part of the same thing now. It's states, and strong states are going to do what strong states do. They've been doing it since the dawn of time. Like, this is a perfectly logical behavior. We need to respond with a strategic framework too.